why we have to identify whether they are resident person or non-resident person. I think you can remember I have mentioned it last week. Here, this is the slide. So, resident person means a person who resides in Sri Lanka, and that is the most common determination. And for the resident person, we consider the income they receive from the world. Their world income should be considered for the taxation of Sri Lanka. So that means if they have an income from in another country, that income also should be considered for the taxation within Sri Lanka. And if that person is a non-resident person, for that non-resident person's income, which is arises from the source in Sri Lanka, can be taxed in Sri Lanka. I think you can remember that part. So now we should know the way of determining whether that person is a resident or a non-resident person, because it is very important. There should be a test. There should be some characteristics that to be determined, that to be considered to identify whether that person is a resident person or a non-resident person. So section 69 is provided that facility. So under that section 69(1), we have two kinds of tests. We call them primary test and residual test. So we use this primary test and residual test to determine whether that person is a resident or non-resident. Actually, resident is applicable only for the taxation. Normally, we know citizenship of the persons. So citizenship and the residency is two different things. So for the taxation, we have to consider whether that person is resident or non-resident mean, and not whether that person is a citizen or non-citizen. For the determination of the residency of the individual, because we have, I think you can remember, the person can be either an individual or an entity. That means entity means it can be a company, a partnership, or trust, or any other institution. So in this case, now we are going to determine about an individual. So if we are an individual, if that person is an individual, now we are going to determine whether that person is an individual, resident individual or not. So for that purpose, we have two different tests, primary tests and residual test. So primary test means, primary test is defined under section 69, subsection 1 and paragraph A, and paragraph B as well for the primary tests. And for the residual test, we have two sub-paragraphs, that is two paragraphs, that is paragraph C and paragraph D. And the primary test can be divided into two. We can consider in two aspects. One is qualitative and the next one is quantitative. So qualitative means if the residency can be determined based on the facts, that is qualitative. And residency is determined based on the number of days they are physically present during the 12 months period. So if an individual is considered as a resident, if these two tests, one of these two tests are considered, if that assessment means one of these primary tests, then we can consider that person is a resident. So these are those two primary tests and two residual tests. These two are resides in Sri Lanka, and next second one. This is the first one. This is the second one. 69 subsection 1 paragraph A is the first primary test. It is a qualitative test because it determined based on the facts. And next one is next provision is provided under section 69 subsection 1 paragraph B. We called it a quantitative test. Quantitative test means we determine it based on the physical presence with number of days physical presence in Sri Lanka. For an example, if Dr. Smith came to Sri Lanka on 11th October 2018, that means he came to Sri Lanka on 11th October 2018 and went back to USA on 11th May 2019. He stayed 213 days in Sri Lanka. That was more than 183 days. That means for a 12 months period, he stayed in Sri Lanka. Therefore, we consider this person, Dr. Smith, as a resident in Sri Lanka. So we can started his residency from the day he arrived to Sri Lanka, and even though he's gone back during within the period of within the year of assessment to all year of assessment until the end of the year of assessment, we consider that person as a resident. That is why even though this person has this person went back to Sri Lanka on 11th May 2019, May 29 means 19 means 90-20 year of assessment, 19-20 year of assessment. Because of that, for the 19-20 whole year of assessment, we consider that person as a resident. And the next residual test is we have discussed about two primary tests and the two residual tests. So the next first residual test, first provision is whether that person is an employee of the government or an official of the government. If that person is an official of the government, and if he stays in abroad, if that person's spouse is also stay in abroad, then we consider both are as non-resident. Resident, because even though that person stay more than 180, not stay in Sri Lanka more than 183 days, that means if that person stays abroad whole year of assessment, even though that person stays in another country for whole year of assessment, since that person is an official of the government or an employee of the government of Sri Lanka, then we consider that person as a resident in Sri Lanka. අපේ ওই තානාපති කාර්යාලවල අපේ රටවල ඉන්න තානාපති කාර්යාලවල ඉන්න officers. So we consider that kind of persons as resident person in Sri Lanka. The next residual test is to determine whether an employee who is working on a Sri Lanka ship. If a person works on a Sri Lanka ship, even though that person is not staying in Sri Lanka for 183 days, we consider that person as a resident in Sri Lanka. So we call these last two tests as residual tests, and for the first two tests as primary tests. If one test is qualified, then we can consider that employee as that person as a resident person in Sri Lanka. This is an example for that reside rule. So I have not explained about this reside rule. I have explained only this 183 days rule. So for the resides rule, I have given you an example and the explanation here. So this means, what is the meaning of resides? Resides means, that is, we can consider the ordinary meaning of the term resides, because we have not given the definition for the term resides in our Inland Revenue Act. Therefore, we can consider the ordinary meaning for the term resides. Therefore, resides means where that person's normal place is. If his normal living place is in Sri Lanka, then we consider that person as resides in Sri Lanka. For that purpose, we consider where he lives. If he lives physically in Sri Lanka, we consider that person as resides in Sri Lanka at that time. If that person resides, the person is resides means that person's children are going to school in Sri Lanka. That person has employment in Sri Lanka. That person may have property, land, vehicle, and everything in Sri Lanka. If that person has everything, and especially bank accounts, if he has his whole bank accounts in Sri Lanka, we consider these as characteristics to determine whether that person is resides in Sri Lanka. Then අපි වගේ අය තමයි. අපි වගේ අය, since we are staying in Sri Lanka whole day, my family is here, my parents are living in Sri Lanka, so my children are going to schools, so they are going to Sri Lankan schools, Sri Lankan universities, and I have bank accounts. My children have bank accounts, and I am working in Sri Lanka. I have property in Sri Lanka. So if I have everything in Sri Lanka, then we can consider that person resides in Sri Lanka. Sometimes it doesn't matter the period. So if it is a lengthy period or a short time period, we have to consider whether that person resides in Sri Lanka or not. So these are the items we consider to determine whether that person resides in Sri Lanka or not. Mainly the family and business or employment ties. That means if we have an employment in Sri Lanka, if our family is in Sri Lanka, then we can consider as we are resides in Sri Lanka. And the next one is maintenance and location of assets. That means sometimes our motor vehicle, our home, our land, everything in Sri Lanka. And social and living arrangements means sometimes we are maybe a member of any clubs or associations, sometimes OG, OB, or any other alumni associations. We may be a member sometimes for any other associations. If we are a member of that association, and if that associations are within Sri Lanka, then we can consider as we are resides in Sri Lanka. This is one of the practical exercises. So in this case, I have mentioned that Mr. Saman is doing his occupation in India. That means he works for India and remitting his earnings to Sri Lanka. His permanent home available in Sri Lanka. His spouse and children live in Sri Lanka. Is he resident in Sri Lanka or not? Now we have to consider whether that person resides in Sri Lanka or not. So how can we decide whether that person is residing in Sri Lanka or not? This is the answer. If Mr. Saman resides in Sri Lanka and resident for the purpose of income tax, irrespective of the reasons that he stays more than 183 days outside the Sri Lanka for a year. That means even though his occupation is within another country, all his other ties are within Sri Lanka. His family is in Sri Lanka, his children are in Sri Lanka, spouse is in Sri Lanka. So we consider that Mr. Saman is in Sri Lanka. But it depends on the facts. Sometimes if that person is his occupation is in another country, and if his family and everything is in India, then we have to consider that as that person as a non-resident person. මම දැන් ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙන්නේ නැති අපි මේකෙදි බලන්නේ මෙයා කොහෙද ඉන්නේ කියන එක. දවස් 183කට වඩා වැඩි කාලයක් මෙයා ලංකාවෙන් පිට හිටියත් අපි එතනදි සලකනවා මෙයා resident කියලා. But we have to consider the facts. That is why I called it a primary test but qualitative test. This is also a practical exercise. So if there's a lady, Mrs. Caldera, she is an accountant who is doing her occupation in Bangladesh. She lives there with her spouse and children in a rented apartment. That means she is in Bangladesh with her family and she rented the apartment. Her children are studying in Bangladesh and her earnings used for family expenditure and the remaining part is deposited to bank accounts in Bangladesh. That means all transactions, every ties are with the country Bangladesh. Sometimes she is remitting foreign earnings to her parents. That means her parents are living in Sri Lanka. She has a home in Sri Lanka too, not only the parents, but she has a home in Sri Lanka. Mrs. Caldera is having the fixed deposits in Sri Lanka. That means fixed deposits are in Sri Lanka, parents are in Sri Lanka, she has a home in Sri Lanka. And she is a member of the school of OG Association. Is she resident in Sri Lanka or not? So how can we consider, how can we determine whether that person, that Mrs. Caldera is a resident person or a non-resident person? How can we determine? Who can tell me?
She is non-resident purpose for the tax purposes because she has all close association with the other country.
Other country, yes, that is true. She has close associates with other country. කරුණු ගොඩකින් වැඩි බර තියෙන්නේ කොහෙද? Which part is has a more weight? That is for the non-resident part. එයාගේ ඔක්කොම තියෙන වැඩි බර තියෙන්නේ හෙට. එතකොට that is why I have told you that we have to consider the residency based on tax. Yes,
madam.
Yes.
Tax කරන්න.
ඇහුනේ. Hello, කාට හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවද?
පැයට ගෙවනවා. මාස්ටර්ස්
කාට හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක්ද ගෙදර කතාවක්ද? Mrs. Caldera resides in Bangladesh and non-resident for the purpose of income tax in Sri Lanka as her regular home, family, social and economic interest, family dependence available in Bangladesh. That means rather than the facts in Sri Lanka. තමයි අපේ උත්තරේ වෙන්නේ. So in this case, this is also a practical exercise. In this case, Mr. David is a citizen of UK and a director of a Sri Lankan company. Mr. David is required to travel to Sri Lanka for his official purposes. Mr. David was physically present in Sri Lanka for the calendar years 2021 and 2023 on the following days. Now we have given several days. So we have to check whether these dates are correct by examining this Mr. David's passport. We have to check the dates whether those are correct or not. So in this case, Mr. David came to Sri Lanka on 1st of October 2021 and he stayed until December 31st of 2021. Then again, he came to Sri Lanka on June 1st and stayed until 30th September. Then he again came back to Sri Lanka on 1st of November and stayed here until 31st December. And year 2023, he came to Sri Lanka on 1st of May 2023 and went back on 31st of August 2023. Mr. David stopped traveling to Sri Lanka after August 31st, 2023. That means we have an assumption. We have to assume that Mr. David does not reside in Sri Lanka. If he resides in Sri Lanka, it is not necessary to count the dates, 183 days, because we have four rules. If one rule is applicable for this Mr. David, then we can determine as he is a resident person. That is why you are given this assumption. According to this assumption, he is not residing in Sri Lanka. So, is he resident in Sri Lanka for 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24? So, now we have to check whether this person is resident in Sri Lanka for this year of assessments or not. So, we have to count the dates he stayed in Sri Lanka. After that count, we have to aggregate those days for a 12-month period. If that exceeds more than 183 days, then we can consider that person as resident in Sri Lanka. This is the so here in the year 2021, from November 1st to December 31st, there are 61 days. From June 1st to September 30th, there are 122 days. From November 1st to December 31st, 61 days, and May 1st to August 31st, 122 days. So now we have to determine whether this person is resident for a year of assessment 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. This is the answer. He is not resides in Sri Lanka. We assume that he is not resides in Sri Lanka because it has given in this question. So Mr. David is a tax resident for tax year 21, 22, as he is physically present in Sri Lanka for at least 183 days in a 12-month period. So we have to consider 12-month period. 12-month period is started from November 1st, 2021 to 30th October 2022. So during that 12 months period, he stayed in Sri Lanka for 183 days. If we can aggregate these days, it will be 183. Therefore, we can consider for the year of assessment 21-22 as he is a resident for the whole year of assessment. That means for the September 30th means 22-23 year of assessment, he is resident because this is December 31st means 22 December 31st means for the 22-23 year of assessment, for the total year of assessment, whole year of assessment, we have to consider as resident. Here, Mr. David is also tax resident for tax year 2022 and 23-24 as he is physically present in Sri Lanka for at least 183 days in a 12-month period. එතකොට මේකදී අපි බලනවා මාස 12ක් ඇතුළත කාලය මෙයා හිටියද කියලා. එතකොට මේ මාස 12 කාලය ඉවර වෙන දවස වෙනකොට තියෙන year of assessment එකම අපිට සලකන්න වෙනවා. මෙයා අපේ රටේ හිටියා කියලා resident කියලා. So in the last stay, Mr. David is not a tax resident for tax year 24-25. 24-25 වල අපිට ඒක සලකන්න බැරි වෙන්නේ because for the year 23-24 he is stay in Sri Lanka less than 183 days in a 12-month period. beginning or ending in tax year 2024. එතකොට 2024 ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඒ අවුරුද්ද ගත්තොත් මෙයා දින 183ක් ලංකාවේ ඉඳලා නැහැ. එතකොට මෙයා මේ 23 අවුරුද්දේ අගෝස්තු 31 ඉවරයි. එතනින් එහාට මෙයා ඉඳලා නැහැ. එතකොට 183ක් නැහැ මෙතනදී. ඒක නිසා අපි හිතනවා එයා resident නැහැ කියලා. Mr. David is not non-resident for the period from 1st of Mr. David is non-resident for the period from 1st of April 2021 to 30th October 2021. That means prior to this date. Prior to this date, because he came to Sri Lanka on November 1st, 2021. Because of that, prior to this date, he is non-resident. But after this date, he is resident, and we have to consider until the end of that year of assessment as he is resident. He commences being a resident from the start of the 183-day period under Section 71. As a result, his first day of Sri Lanka residency is November 1st of 2021. Therefore, he is resident for the period from 1st of November 2021 to 31st March 2022. Up to that date, he is resident. And Mr. David stopped traveling to Sri Lanka after August 31st, 2023. After this date, he didn't come to Sri Lanka. He ceases being a resident of Sri Lanka at the date of, that means 24/3/31 කියන්නේ තක්සේරු වර්ෂය ඉවර වෙන දවස වෙනකම්. එයා ඊට කලින් ගියත් 22-23 year of assessment එකට තමයි මේ ටික වැටෙන්නේ. ඒතර 22-23 year of assessment එකේ 23rd of August 31st වෙනකන් එයා හිටියේ නැහැ. එතකොට අපි මෙතනදී සලකන්නේ until 3rd of 31st March 2022 year of assessment, we can consider as this person is resident. And after that, he says as being a resident of Sri Lanka at the date of 31st March 2024. Resident for the full year of assessment, 23-24, he is non-resident. එතකොට දැන් මෙන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි residency එක බලන්නේ. So we have to consider 12 months period. During that 12 months period, we have to consider whether that person is stayed in Sri Lanka or not. If he stayed in Sri Lanka for 183 days, then we can consider that person as that person a resident person in Sri Lanka. Okay. Now I will give you some examples later. Then you can calculate the residency and we can discuss it later. If you have questions, you can ask now. If you don't have questions, we can move to the next slide. Actually, this residency is for the partnership. Earlier, we discussed about the residency of an individual. Now we move to determine whether a partnership is resident or not, because person means not only an individual, but it includes individual, partnership, company, and trust. Therefore, we have to consider partnership residency and trust, partnership and company's residency. So that is why I have included these two slides. So now we are going to determine whether how to determine a residency of a partnership. So if it is a partnership, we have to consider where that partnership is formed. If that partnership is formed in Sri Lanka, then we can consider that partnership as a resident partnership. And the next item is whether that partnership's management and control is exercised in Sri Lanka or not. එතකොට management එක හරි control එක හරි ලංකාවේ තියෙනවා නම් then also we can consider that partnership as a resident. We have two criteria. One is whether it is formed in Sri Lanka. If it is not formed in Sri Lanka, then we can consider whether that partnership's management and control is exercised in Sri Lanka or not. If it is exercised in Sri Lanka, then we can determine as this partnership is a resident partnership in Sri Lanka. If we consider a trust, then we have another criteria to determine the residency of a trust. So, if that trust is settled or established in Sri Lanka, or at any time during the year, a trustee of the trust is resident in Sri Lanka. You know, there may be lot of trustees in a trust. If a trustee of the trust is resident in Sri Lanka, then of course we can consider that trust as a resident in Sri Lanka. The last one is, at any time during the year, a person resident in Sri Lanka directs or any direct senior managerial decisions of the trust. That means if their decisions are taken within Sri Lanka, or managerial decisions are taken within Sri Lanka, then for that period we can consider that trust as a resident trust. එතකොට අර individual වගේ බලන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. Individual එකට මම කරුණු හතරක් කිව්වා. I have told four conditions to check whether that individual is resident or not. For the partnership, we have another different conditions, and for the trust, we have another 3 conditions to determine their residency. And for a company, we have another criteria, another conditions to determine the residency. For a craft to become a resident company, that company should be incorporated or formed under the laws of Sri Lanka. Laws of Sri Lanka. That means, you know, a company should be registered, incorporated under the Companies Act. If that company is incorporated under the Companies Act of Sri Lanka, then we can consider that company as a resident company in Sri Lanka. And the next condition is, if that company is registered to principal office is in Sri Lanka, if that company's principal office in Sri Lanka, then of course we can consider that company as a resident company. Or if that company's management or control of the affairs of the company are exercised in Sri Lanka, then also we can consider the company as a resident company. So now I have explained about the residency of an individual, a partnership, a trust, and a company. These are the conditions to be fulfilled to become a resident of Sri Lanka. Do you have questions regarding the residency of an individual or a trust, partnership, or a company? කාට හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවද මේ ගැන? අපි මේ ගැන ගණන් ටිකක් හදමු. මම ඔයගලන්ට ගණන් ටිකක් කියවන්නම්. අපි මේ ටික හැදුවට පස්සේ I will give you an exercises for this for the calculation of 183 days, because it is the most difficult thing. Other resize rules you can determine using resize rule according to the facts. But for the calculation of 183 days is very difficult. So I will give you some exercises, and after that we can discuss it. Okay, now we can move to the sources of income. So I have explained about the residency. I have explained about the I have explained about the charging provision. According to that charging provision, we have to consider a person's taxable income for the calculation of their payable tax. Calculation of their payable tax. That means for a year of assessment of a person, we can calculate that person's payable tax using their taxable income. For that taxable income, we have to apply tax rates to determine that person's tax liability. So for the calculation of that taxable income, we have a path to move. So we have to go for a, we have to consider several steps. Step 1 is the sources of income. That means for the calculation of taxable income, first of all, we have to determine the income sources of a person. So what are the income sources? Income sources means the income from where the income generates. We should know from where the income generates. And what we have to do is, we have to categorize those income into 3 baskets. We call them income sources. So we have 4 income baskets, 4 income sources. We call them employment income, business income, investment income, and other income. මම හිතන්නේ ඔයගලන්ට මතක ඇති මම charging provision එක කියනකොට කිව්වා year of assessment එකකට person කෙනෙක් එයාගේ taxable income එක මත තමයි tax rates apply කරලා tax ගෙවන්නේ. එතකොට අපි දැන් we know the year of assessment, we know about a person, now we are moving to calculate taxable income. So the first step to calculate taxable income is determining the sources of income. So to determine the sources of income, we should have better knowledge about the income sources of a person. So income source එකක් income එක ලැබෙන තැනක් තියෙනවා. කොහෙන්ද ලැබෙන income? මේක තමයි වඩාම වැදගත් දේ. So now, according to Inland Revenue Act number 24 of 2017, we have 4 kinds of income sources. That means employment income, business income, investment income, and other income. So for these 4 income sources, we have separate sections. For the income, employment income, we have a separate section, that is section 5. For business income, we have section 6. For the investment income, we have section 7. And for other income, we have section 8. According to this section 5, the income we have to categorize under employment income. කවුද මේ ගැන දන්නේ? මොකද්ද කියන්නේ මේ income sources කියලා? First of all, what we have to do? We have to gather all the income we receive. That means if we consider a if we consider an individual person has 4 income sources. But for a company, the company has only 3 income sources. Why is that? කාටද ඒක තේරෙන්නේ?
Company doesn't have employment income.
Yes, company doesn't have employment income. Employment එකක් කියන්නේ අපි වගේ පුද්ගලයෝ කරන service එක. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ඉන්න employment එක තමයි ඒ. එතකොට අපිට employment එකක් තියෙන්නේ අපි මිනිස්සු හින්දා. company එකක් employment income එකක් නැහැ. company එකේ employees ලා හිටියට company එක කියන කෙනාට employment income එකක් ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. Because of that, when we are calculating a company's taxable income, we have to consider only 3 sources. If we can calculate an individual's tax liability, then we have to consider 4 income sources. Now we are going to consider the income that can be receivable by an individual. What kind of source, what kind of income sources what are the income sources we have? One can be an employment income. Then there will be a business income if that person is engaging in a business. And in most of the cases, we have interest income because we have bank accounts. Therefore, we have interest income. And for some individuals, they may have dividend income if they have invested in share market. And if we have more than 1 or 2 houses, then we can rented out that houses, and we can earn rent income. If we have any secret recipe or something, if we have specific secret recipe for or something, then we can receive royalty. And sometimes we purchase lottery. If we won a lottery, then we will have a lottery winnings. අපිට මෙහෙම income ලැබෙනවා නේද? ඒකට මෙන්න මේ වගේ ලැබෙන ඔක්කොම income අරගන්නවා. First of all, we have to gather all income we receive. What we have to do next? The next step is we have to categorize those income for these 4 income sources. So now we have 4 income sources. First one is employment income. Second one is business income. Third one is investment income. If we cannot categorize our income into these 3 sources, that kind of income can be categorized under other income. ලේසියෙන් other income එකට categorize කරන්න පුළුවන් income එකක් අපිට ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. In most cases, all of the income can be categorized into these 3 categories, these 2 income sources, 3 income sources. So, if we have an employment income, what is the meaning of employment income? What kind of employment income we receive? What are the employment income we receive?
Salaries.
What else?
Bonus.
Salaries. Incentives. Overtime.
Bonus.
Other allowances, vehicle allowances, fuel allowances.
Bonuses, medical allowances.
Medical allowances. There may be lot of allowances. If that allowances is received from an employer, then that kind of income should be categorized under employment income. Then, if that person is engaging in a business, a trade, a business, vocation or profession, that income should be categorized under business income. So what is the meaning of profession, vocation? We can discuss it later when we are considering this business income. Then, if we receive an interest, discount, dividends, charges, annuities, natural resource payments, rents, premiums, royalties, capital gains, winning from lotteries, betting or gambling, that kind of income should be categorized under investment income. Normally, we call this kind of income a passive income. Why? Because very easily we can earn this income. Hari lazy. Kisima mahansiyak nahi. For an employment, we have to do lot. For the business, we have to do lot of risk. But for this income, very easily we can earn. සල්ලි ටික බැංකුවේ දානවා නිකම්ම interest එනවා. share market එකේ shares ගන්නවා නිකම්ම dividends එනවා. නිකන් තියෙන ගෙයක් ගිහිල්ලා කුලියට දෙනවා නිකම්ම rent එකක් එනවා. Therefore we call this income a pay income. So if we categorize any income into these three, that income should be categorized under other income. එතකොට අපිට මේ other income කොටට දාන්න එකක් ලැබෙන්නේ නැති තරම් හැම income එකක්ම අපිට මෙතනට දාන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. හැබැයි business income එක කතා කරනකොට මම එක දෙයක් ඔයගලන්ට කියන්නම් මෙතනට දාන්න පුළුවන්. Then now we are going to relevant source. Why do we have to determine the relevant source? Why can't we categorize employment income under different source? ඇයි අපිට salary හම්බෙනවා ඇයි ඒව මේවට දාන්න බැරි? Because we have a specific section for specific type of income. In these specific sections, that section itself explains the amounts what we have to include in calculating the employment income. මෙන්න මේක calculate කරනකොට what are the income we have to include, what are the income we have to exclude, and what are the income we have to determine, what are the income we have to remove. Everything are provided under section 5. According to section 5, total amounts we have to consider under employment income are provided. Under section 6, all details are provided under section 6 about business income. About investment income, all details are provided under section 7. එතකොට මේ ඒ වගන්තියේ ඒ තොරතුරු කියනවා. එතකොට මේ වගන්තියේ කියනවා what are the investment income we have to consider for the taxation? What are the investment income we have to remove when we are calculating the tax liability? එතකොට මේ හැම වගන්තියකම මේ දේවල් කියනවා. මේ කියන නිසා තමයි අපි හරියට determine කරන්න ඕනේ මේක ඇතුළට වැටෙන income එක. මේකට වැටෙන income එක. මේකට වැටෙන්නේ කොහොම ඒවද? අපිට මේක දැක්කාම very easily we can categorize our income into these three sources. But in practice, it is not such an easy thing. It is very difficult. කියන්න පුළුවන් දෙහිම අවස්ථාවක්. අපි හිතනවා හරි ලේසි අයියෝ employment income එක ලේසියෙන් අපිට පුළුවන් දාන්න. අපි දන්නවා අපේ employer ගෙන් ලැබෙන සියලුම දේවල් අපි categorize කරන්න ඕනේ employment income යටතේ. That benefit may be a cash benefit or sometimes it may be a non-cash benefit. Cash benefit වෙන්න පුළුවන්, non-cash benefit වෙන්න පුළුවන්. It doesn't matter. All cash and non-cash benefits should be considered for income tax purposes. එතකොට අපි accountant මහත්තයෙක් කිමත් ඉන්නවා කිව්වා දන්නව ඇති කොහොමද මේ employment ගණනය කරන්නේ කියලා. Okay. Now we are going to determine the relevant source. Employment or business. Some income, it is very difficult to consider whether that income is an employment income or a business income. හරි අමාරුයි සමහර අවස්ථාවල. දැන් අපිට බැලුව බැලමට තේරෙන්නේ අයියෝ මේක මොකද්ද කියලා. ඒ ප්‍රැක්ටිකලි වැඩ කරනකොට ප්‍රැක්ටිකල් සිටුේෂන් එකේදී මේක හරි අමාරු වෙන අවස්ථා තියෙනවා. What is the reason? Because there no line is drawn within that employment income and business income. කිසිම තැනක ඉරක් ගහලා වෙන් කරලා නැහැ. එතකොට අපිට therefore we have to consider the facts to determine whether that is an employment income or a business income. Employment involves provision of labor for gain. Provision of labor for gain. Investment involves holding assets for gain, and business involves a combination of both. So we receive employment income in respect of the provision of labor. අපි මහන්සි වෙලා අපේ ශ්‍රමය දුන්නොත් අපිට ලැබෙනවා employment income. Investment income involves holding assets. පේනවද මෙතන? Holding assets. We hold shares, we receive dividends. We hold our money in the bank, we receive interest. We hold our property, we receive rent. අන්නේ වගේ ඒවා hold කරගෙන ඉඳීම මත ලැබෙන ඒවා දානවා investment income. Sometimes business involves combination of both. Business එකකදී risk එකක් අරගෙන මේ ඔක්කොම දේවල් කරන අවස්ථාවක් business වෙන්න පුළුවන්. As a business is a combination, there are difficulties in clearly defining the boundaries between employment and business. It is very difficult to draw a line in between employment income and business. And business and investment. It is not only the investment and business and employment, it is very difficult to draw a line in between business and investment. Any income that does not fall neatly within the definition of employment, business and investment, that residual can be categorized under other sources, which I have. එතකොට අපිට තේරෙනවා තුනටම මේ sources තුනටම යන්නේ නැති එකක් තිබුණොත් that residual category we can categorize under other income source. Okay. Now we are going to determine the relevant source using some character. How the work is done. One is how the work is done. If an employment, how, if we consider an independent contractor and an employee, we determine whether that is an employment income or a business income. Now we are going to determine whether that is employment income or a business income. For that consideration, we can consider how the work is done. For an individual, the employer told us how we should do it. If we are an independent contractor, no one tells us how to do it. What do they do? What do they request? They request only the thing that their requirement, they can ask their requirement, but no one knows how to do it. Only the independent contractor knows how to do it. පැහැදිලිද මං කියනද? මම සේවකයෙක් නම් if I am an employee, employer ask me to do something and he told me how to do it. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ රස්සාවල් කරනවනේ. ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ රස්සාව කරන හැටි ඕගොල්ලන්ට ඕන විදිහට කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ employer කියනවා මෙහෙම කරන්න කියලා. මෙහෙම කරන්න කියන දේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ කරනවා. You can do it. But if you are an independent contractor, ඕගොල්ලන්ට කියනවාද කවුරු හරි ගිහිල්ලා මේක මෙහෙම කරලා කරන්න කියලා? No. ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන්නේ මොකද? requirement එක. මට AC එකක් හයි කරගන්න ඕන. AC එක බඩු ගෙනත් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි මට තේරෙනවද කියන්න? මෙතන වයර් දාන්න, මෙහෙම වට දාන්න, මෙහෙම හයි කරන්න කියලා? No, we can't tell it. The person knows how to do it. So, if a person was told by some other person to do some work, the way we have to do that work, then that person is an employee. අපිට කවුරු හරි කරන්න කියලා කියනවා මේක කරන්න. මේක කරුණකින් කියන්න බෑ, මේ කරුණ හැම එකක්ම එකට බලලා තමයි we have to consider all criteria to determine whether that person is an employee or not. එක කරුණාකරම් නෙවෙයි. Then the next one is whose materials and equipment are used. Whose materials and equipment are used. Now you are an employee of a company. Do you bring your laptops and your table, your chair, your file, your books, your pen, and half sheet and everything to your office to do that work? No, all are provided by them. The person who requests, who need your service. That means they provide all materials, all equipments to you for that service. So they are, but the independent contractor use their own equipment. That person use their own equipment, but the employee are provided all required materials and equipment for the work. The next one is timing of work. Timing of work. Employees are given a specific time period. We have to go to for a work by 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. Then we should be there. We cannot move. We cannot leave from the office. We have to work there until 4:30, 4:15 or until 5. If we want to go early, we have to take a leave. We should apply a leave. Timing of work. Independent contractors are told when a job must be completed. That means they will give a job. මට AC එකක් අයි කරලා. මට දවසින් දෙකෙන් ඕනේ. අපි එහෙම තමයි කියන්නේ. අපි කියනවා දෙයාට ඔයා උදේ 8ට එන්න ඕනේ. ඔයා 5 වෙනකම් වැඩ කරන්න. අපිට එහෙම කියන්න බෑ. අන්න එතකොට තමයි මෙතන වෙනස තේරෙන්නේ. එහෙම වෙනකොට අපි තෝරා ගන්නවා අපි දෙන්නේ ජොබ් එකක් කරන්න. ඒ ජොබ් එකේදී එයාට ඕන වෙලාවක එයා එනවා ඕන වෙලාවක ඇවිල්ලා ඒ වැඩේ කරලා යන්න. හැබැයි අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් මට දවසකින් ඕනේ මේක දෙකකින් ඕනේ. කාලය අපිට කියන්න. අපිට ටයිම් එක දෙන්න බෑ. ඔයා මේ වෙලාවෙ ඉඳලා from 8:30 to 5 p.m. you should work කියලා අපිට කියන්න බෑ. But for an employee we can tell them. එතකොට ඔන්න ඔය වගේ තමයි මෙයා employee ද එහෙමත් නැත්නම් independent contractor කෙනෙක්ද කියලා බලන්න. Then the next one, who does the work? Who does the work? If we ask a job from a person, if that person can hire a third party, then that person will not be an employee. Then ඕගොල්ලන්ට වැඩක් පවරනවා. ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ ආයතනය. පුළුවන් ද I can't do it. I will ask my husband to come and do that work for me on behalf of me. කියන්න පුළුවන්ද? No power to delegate. If that person is an employee, he does not have power to delegate that work. He himself should do that work if that person is an employee. If that person is an independent contractor, he can hire third party. අපි කවුරු හරි AC එක හදන්න කියලා මනුස්සයෙක්ට කිව්වහම එයා වැඩේ බාරගෙන එයා ඊළඟ දවසේ වෙන කෙනෙක් වෙනවා මෙන්න මේ ටික හයි කරලා යන්න. හැබැයි මම රස්සාවට ගිහිල්ලා වාඩි වුණාට පස්සේ ඔෆිස් එකේදී මට මහන්සි නම් කම්මැලි නම් මම පහුදාට මගේ මහත්තයාට කියලා ඔය අද ගිහිල්ලා මම වෙනට වැඩ කරන්න කියන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. Then the next one is exclusivity. Independent contractor work for more than one client. That means if that person is an independent contractor, at once he can work for several clients. But if that person is an employee, he can work for one employer at once. අපිට එක සැරේකට ගිහිල්ලා අපි ඉන්නවා අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඔය ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස්ලා එක ආයතනික වැඩ කරන ගමන් ගිහිල්ලා තව තැනක ඩිරෙක්ටර් විදියට වැඩ කරන අය ඉන්නවා. එහෙම දෙකක් තුනක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් එයාට අපි මෙතනදී සලකන්නේ ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ට් කොන්ට්‍රැක්ටර් වැඩ බාර ගන්නවා මෙයා මෙතනින් ගන්නවා එයා වෙනුවෙන් වෙන කෙනෙක් කරනවා අතන බාර ගන්නවා එයා වෙනුවෙන් වෙන කෙනෙක් කරනවා එහෙම එක සැරේට වැඩ ගොඩාක් ගන්නවා ඒත් එම්ප්ලොයිට අද මම මෙතන වැඩ කරොත් මයාට දෙක power and by he cannot delegate his power so he has to do that job by his own by himself. The next one is training. Independent contractors arrange and pay for their own training. They should gain their traits. But the employers arrange and pay for the training of employees. The employee කෙනෙකුට නම් එයා employee කෙනෙක්ද independent contractor කෙනෙක්ද කියලා අපි තේරුම් ගන්නේ මෙන්න මේ කරුණු අනුව. Then the next one is what is paid for? What is paid for? Independent contractors are paid to produce a result or otherwise for hours work. Employees are paid to attend for a set time. එතකොට අපි කරලා දෙන අපි ඉවර කරන ෆයිල් එකට අපිට පේමන්ට් එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ. අපි දෙන හදන එකට අදාළව පේමන්ට් එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට අපේ කාලය they paid for a time we work. එතකොට 8 to 5. 8:30 to 4:15. For that period, they pay fees. The next one is continuing relationship. Independent contractors have a limited relationship. After finishing his job, their relationship is over. But typically determined by the scope of the task. Employees have a continuing relationship with their employers, not only for 1 week, not only for a month, not only for years, sometimes more than 30 years, we can work for one employer. Continuing relationship. The next one is calculation of remuneration. Independent contractors take risk and derive varying returns. Typically, these expenses are not reimbursed and they have an opportunity for profit or loss. Independent contractors la දැන් ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙනවා එයාගේ ආදායමක් වෙනම ලබන්නේ. For earn that income, he has to incur some expenses. Finally, he will receive profit or a loss. But an employee have their proper business expenses reimbursed. Their remuneration is a flat amount for time work and there is no opportunity for additional profit or loss. එතකොට දැන් employees ලා වෙච්ච අපි හැමෝම දන්නවා අපි වැඩ කරනකොට අපිට මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? අපි if we incur some expenses on behalf of that employer, then they will reimburse us. Otherwise, they pay us a remuneration that is a flat amount. So we don't have opportunity for additional profit or loss. But the independent contractor, they have facility, they have an opportunity for additional profit or loss. So then, likewise, we have to determine whether that person is an employee or an independent contractor. So now I think you can understand independent contractors receive business income while employees receive employment income. තේරෙනවද ඔයගොල්ලන්ට? අපි මේ පුද්ගලයෝ දෙන්නෙක් දිහා බලන විදිහ. මම මේ ටික තව දුරටත් පැහැදිලි කරනවා අපි employment income එක සහ business income ගැන ආයි වෙනම කතා කරමු. Then we are going to determine the source of business and investment. The definition of employment is dominant over the definition of business and investment. That means, first of all, we have to categorize an income which is relevant for the employment. Income first of all, we have to consider whether this income is an employment or not. If it is an employment income, we have to categorize it under employment income. ඒ නිසායි අපි කියන්නේ මේක dominant කියලා. This employment is dominant. ඒක employment income එකකට වැටෙන එකක් නම් කිසිසේත්ම අපිට ඒක බෑ business income හෝ investment income යටතේ categorize කරන්න. Then ඊට පස්සේ අපි බලනවා after that, first of all we have to categorize income under employment income. After that the balance amount has to be categorized under business income. Finally under investment income. If we categorize under these three categories, then only we can categorize the residual income under other income category. Then we have to consider whether that income is a business income or an investment income. පළවෙනිම බලන්නේ employment ද ඊට පස්සේ බලනවා business ද ඊට පස්සේ තමයි අපි බලන්නේ investment income එකක්ද කියලා. එතකොට if it is an investment income, we can receive that investment income by holding assets. මම අර ඉස්සෙල්ලා කියපු විදියට අපි වෙන් කරලා ගන්නවා. Now we are going to determine the business income and investment income using these criteria. So first one is, what is sold? What is sold? What is sold? So if it is, if we sold a large quantity of product, then we can consider it as a trade. If we are usually engaging in trading, then it will be a business income. If it is a small amount, and if it is not, නිතර අපි ඒ දේ කරන්නේ නැත්නම් අපිට ඒක business එකක් බැරි වෙනවා. Products are sold continuously. If we are engaging in selling, then we can categorize it under business income. Then length of the ownership. If the length of the ownership is very short period, that means we are not holding assets. Holding an assets means it should be categorized under investment income. That is why we consider the length of ownership. If the length of ownership is very limited, very small period, very few days, that means very shorter period, then it will be a business. ඒක තේරෙනවනේ. බඩුවක් ගන්නවා විකුණනවා. සමහර ඒවා තියෙනවා අපි අර ගන්නවා විකුණන්නේ නැහැ සදාකාලිකව ළඟ තියාගෙන. අන්න එතකොට එතන තියෙන investment, hold of an asset. හැබැයි අපි නිතර ගන්නවා විකුණනවා නම් එතනදි තේරෙන්නේ අපි මේක ව්‍යාපාරයක් විදිහට කරනවා කියලා. Then next one is repetition. Repetition of transactions suggests a trade. Repetition of transactions. Repeat වෙනවා. නිතරම ගන්නවා විකුණනවා repeat වෙනවා. Supplementary work. Trades often process assets to turn them into saleable products. Supplementary work, that not only the trade, but supplementary work are also there. අපි මොකක්ද දෙයක් දෙනවා ඒක after sale services තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේ නොයෙක් කටයුතු සිද්ධ වෙනවා. Then the next one is motivation for activity. So what is the motivation? Making a profit. So if the motivation is a profit, that is a trade. Then the motivation for sale. Now we are going to, this is an example. Read this example and explain what is the business and what is the investment, what kind of source is this. Mr. Pereira, who is resident in Sri Lanka, Mr. Pereira is a resident in Sri Lanka, acquires an office building during the year of assessment 23-24 for 50 million. He acquires an office building for 50 million. Mr. Pereira's activities: passively renting out a property. Passively renting out a property. His activities do not fall within the definition of business. There is no trade. Mr. Pereira intends to hold the property. Which will produce an income of itself through the rent. Further, assuming that this is Mr. Pereira's only office building, therefore, there is no repetition. His activities do, however, clearly fall within the definition of investment income. At the end of the year of assessment, Mr. Pereira must calculate his income from the investment under investment income, because he has office building, so he is not bought that building to sell. Yeah, එක ගත්තේ විකුණන්න නෙවෙයි, office building එකක් ගත්තා. So his activity is hold the asset and renting out the building. So what is he doing? Passively renting out the building. Passively renting out the building means we cannot categorize it under trade. It does not fall within the definition of business, because he is not going to sell it, or he is not going to renting out. Because he has only one building, he just holding that asset and renting out. The situation would be different if Mr. Pereira owned and rented out 5 office buildings. එතකොට පළවෙනි එකේ තියෙන එක office building එකයි. So he rented out that only one building and he holds that asset. But in the next case, he has 5 office buildings and manage the properties by himself. Here, the repetition and active engagement of Mr. Pereira with the properties would be sufficient to constitute a business of property rental. So, at the end of the year of assessment, Mr. Pereira should calculate Can you understand these two situations? Hello. Two situations are there. One is Mr. Pereira has only one building. He acquired a building and he rented it out. In the second situation, he owned 5 buildings and he rented out those old buildings. And there's a repetition and active engagement is there. So can you see the difference between these two situations? Can you understand the differences between two situations? පුළුවන්ද මේ දෙකේ වෙනස තේරුම් ගන්න? Yes. එතන අවස්ථා දෙකක් තියෙනවා. දෙකම කරන්නේ රෙන්ට් කරන එක තමයි. දෙකම කරන්නේ රෙන්ට් කරන කෙනා වුණාට එක්කෙනෙක් බිල්ඩින් එකක් තියාගෙන ඒක රෙන්ට් කර ඔහේ ඉන්නවා. තව කෙනෙක් බිල්ඩින් ගොඩක් අරගෙන ඒක රෙන්ට් එකට දෙනවා, කුඩිය ගන්නවා, එතන රෙන්ට් එකට ඉන්න කෙනා යනකොටම ඔන්න පේ පැඩ් එකක් හරි දාලා තව කෙනෙක් ගන්නවා, එයා යනවා. ඒක හරිම systematic. In the second situation, it is very systematic. But in the first situation, he is only engaging in primary passively renting out a property. So that rental income should be categorized under investment income. In the second situation, that rental income should be categorized under business income. එතකොට අපිට පුළුවන්කම තියෙන්න ඕනේ අපේ කෙනෙකුට person කෙනෙකුට individual කෙනෙකුට ලැබෙන income එක to be categorized in the proper under the proper income source. Because applicable tax provisions, tax rules for each source are different. Employment income එකට අදාළ මොනවාද rules නෙවෙයි business income එකට අදාළ වෙන්නේ. Business income source එකට අදාළ වෙන ඒවා නෙවෙයි investment income source එකට අදාළ. Therefore, we should have very good knowledge about categorizing our income under each source. ඔහේ හිතන ඕන එකක් දාගෙන යන්න බෑ taxation වලදී. හරියටම හරි තැනට අපි මේවා categorize කරන්න ඕන. Then the methods of accounting. So I have given you this under each sources as well. එතකොට අපි එතනදී මේ ගැන කතා කරමු. Accounting, method of accounting කියන එක. Okay. So I have explained about the sources and now we are moving to calculate the assessable income. So after that, categorizing our income under each source, what we have to do, we can remove some items which are not relevant, not entitled for each source. Those items are also provided under same section in the Act and under Schedule 3. In the first step, we collect all income and we should categorize those income under each relevant source. After that, we have to exclude some income items that are not taxable. Those items are provided under each section and under Schedule 3. I think you can remember Schedule 3 is provided for the exemptions and Schedule 1, Schedule 5, Section 5, Section 6 and Section 7 are provided for each income sources. Under each income sources, we have subsections. Subsection 3 is provided for items that should be excluded when we are calculating the taxable income of a person. හරිද? එතකොට මේ එක income source එකට වෙනම වගන්ති තියෙනවා, section තියෙනවා. මේ section වල subsections, we have subsections. Under subsection 3, each section have a subsection 3. Under that subsection 3, we have provided the items that we have to exclude and items we have to exempt. එතකොට ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා exclude කරනවා කියනවා, exempt කරනවා කියනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට එකතු වෙන සියලුම ආදායම් බදු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි මෙතන employment if we consider an employment income, we have to include salaries, overtime, incentives, other allowances, pensions, and everything we have to include. After that, the Act says the items that we have to exclude and exempt them. So if we have included pensions here, we can exemption for government pensions. So if we consider an employee who is a government servant, if that government servant has a government pension, that amount should be removed from here. This is the first step. This is the second step. Under second step, we have to remove excluded and exempt items. After that, we can deduct one more thing. But for the employment income, we do not have permission to deduct expenditure. I explained it earlier as well. So we do not have permission to deduct expenditure. After that, we receive assessable income. We call this amount an assessable income. එතකොට මේ වගේ හැම එකක්ම මෙන්න මේ වගේ කරන්න ඕනේ. මේවා දැන් අපි එකින් එකට sources we will study each source separately from after this session. Then we can calculate assessable income. After that, what we have to do, we have to aggregate total assessable income by aggregating assessable income from each source. Then we will have total assessable income. For that total assessable income, we have to deduct tax reliefs and qualifying payments. After deducting reliefs and qualifying payments, we will receive taxable income. මම මේ relief ගැන qualifying payments ගැන source එකෙන් source එකට මෙතනින් එහාට අපි කතා කරගෙන යන්න. එතකොට දැන් මම මේ කියන්නේ this is just a summary of the study. එතකොට now we have taxable income. After that what we have to do, we have to apply relevant tax rates for that taxable income. Then we have a payable tax. From this payable tax, we can deduct APITO, AITO, withholding tax credits. That means the taxes we have already paid to the department when we are receiving that the income. When we are receiving an income, some payers, income payers deduct some amount on behalf of us, and they send that amount to the department. That is called withholding taxes, APIT and AIT. So we are the owners of that tax payment. So we can deduct our tax portion. Then we will receive balance tax payable or a refund. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ ටික තමයි අපි මේ දැන් කරන්නේ. මම මේ අන්තිමට කතා කරපු ස්ලයිඩ්ස් ටිකේ ඉඳලා මෙන්න මේ ටික තමයි අපි පැහැදිලිව one by one කතා කරගෙන යන්නේ මෙතන ඉඳලා. ඒතර මේ ටික හොඳටම ඔලුවට ගියා නම් අපි කරන්නේ මොකද්ද කියලා ඔයගලන්ට පැහැදිලි වෙයි. හරි. පොඩි බ්‍රේක් එකක් ගමු. ඊට කලින් මට මේ ගැන ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් කවුරු හරි අහන්න. කාට හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න. අපි ඊට පස්සේ පටන් ගමු ඊළඟ ස්ලයිඩ්ස් ටික. අර පොඩි බ්‍රේක් එකක් අරගෙන අපිට ආයෙ පටන් ගන්න පුළුවන්. මොනවාද තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න? දැන් ඔළුවට හොඳට චිත්‍රය ගියාද? අපි මොන පාරේද යන්නේ? අපි මොකද්ද කරන්නේ මේ කියන එක ගැන? ඒක ගැන අවබෝධය ආවේ නැත්නම් අපි කරන දේ ගැන ඔයගලන්ට තේරුම් ගන්න අමාරු වෙනවා. ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න. අහන්න ඕනම ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහන්න. ප්‍රශ්න නැති වෙන්න බෑ. එක මොකදම තේරුන්නේ නැද්ද? නැත්නම් හොඳටම තේරුණාද? එහෙමත් නැත්නම් භාගෙට තේරුණාද? කාටවත් ප්‍රශ්න නැද්ද? You can ask any question. ධනුෂි ප්‍රශ්න නැද්ද?
No, ma'am.
හොඳටම තේරුණාද? Okay, then let's have a break. We can start by 8 now 8:10. 8:20, 20:25. 8:25 we can start.
Okay, madam.
Okay, ma'am.
This is the section I have shown. Let's move to that section. Oh, what happened? Something has happened to the act. Wait for a moment. Hello? Can you see the document?
No, madam.
Yes, madam.
No.
No. No? I can't hear, sorry.
No.
No. Sure. Now?
Now it is scanned.
Now okay, madam.
Now okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
Ah,
madam.
okay. Okay. Yes, this is the Inland Revenue Act. So this is the certified day of this act, 17th October 24th. Yeah, this is the last provision, 203, last section, 203. These are the chapters. Then interpretation section is in 195. Section 195 is for interpretation. Then schedules, first schedule for tax rates, second schedule for investment incentives, third schedule for exempt amounts, fourth one for capital allowances, then fifth one for qualifying payments and reliefs, and sixth for temporary concessions. Now we are in section 1. So this is the legal draftsman's number. This is we call it preamble, the purpose of the act. Then the name of the act, we call it short title. For this is the marginal note. We call it marginal note because it is in the margin. That is why we call it marginal note. In this marginal note, it explains the content of this section. So this is the section, big 1, big 2. This is the section. Here part 1 and this act has 2 parts. Part 1 is for the computation and part 2 is for administration. Then we have chapters and this is the name. So this is the charging provision. I think you can remember I have explained it in my slides. So this is the charging provision. It shows like this. So this is the section. Section 2. Section 2, subsection 1. Within bracket, there's a big one. That is subsection 1. Then subsection 2 is here. Subsection 3 is here. Small a, within bracket, small a, that is a paragraph. In this section 2, subsection 1 has 2 paragraphs, paragraph A and paragraph B. If we have Roman 1 or 2 here, we can call them sub-paragraphs. Here we don't have sub-paragraphs. So we have this charging provision. This is the charging provision I have included in the slide. So we call it imposition. So each and every word I have copied from this section. Then we can move to the next one. Here this is chapter 2, income base. So section 3 is for taxable income. If you read this, you can, normally these are legal terms and legal drafting, therefore it is little bit difficult to understand the drafting method. So it says subject to subsection 2. So subject to this subsection, the taxable income of a person for a year of assessment shall be equal to the total of the person's assessable income for the year from each employment, business, investment, and others. I think you can remember this. That is why I have calculated separate the assessable income from investment, employment, business, investment, and other. After that, I aggregated all these 4 assessable incomes to calculate the taxable income. But it says this. In arriving at taxable income of a year of assessment, qualifying payments and reliefs for that year under section 52 shall be deducted. That is why after aggregating total assessable income, after calculating total assessable income, by aggregating each source assessable income, I deducted qualifying payments and reliefs. After deducting qualifying payments and reliefs from the assessable income from each source, we will have taxable income. So, likewise, as they have mentioned in this provision in section 3, we have to calculate taxable income. Then we can move to the assessable income. Assessable income is provided under section 4. It says the assessable income of a person for a year of assessment from employment, business, investment, and other source shall be equal to, in the case of a resident person, the person's income from wherever the source arises. That means world income. Number 2, in the case of a non-resident person, the person's income from employment and business and investment or other income for that year to the extent that the income arises in or is derived from a source in Sri Lanka. දැන් පැහැදිලි ඇති ඔයගලන්ට මම අර හදනකොට පර්සන් මාර්ගන පර්සන් දෙකකට බෙදලා රෙසිඩන්ට් ද non resident ද කියලා දාලා රෙසිඩන්ට් එක්කෙනාගේ වර්ල්ඩ් ඉන්කම් ගන්න non resident එක්කෙනාගේ ලංකාවෙන් රයිස් වෙච්ච ඉන්කම් එක ගන්න කියලා කිව්වා. අන්න ඒ කිව්වේ මෙන්න මේ කරුණු ටික දාගෙන. Now we can move to section 5. So, what is the marginal note for section 5? It is employment income. So, now we are going to calculate assessable income from employment. To calculate the total assessable income and the taxable income. So the section 5 is for employment income, and this section 5 has 3 subsections: subsection 1, subsection 2, and subsection 3. Here, not only this employment income, all other 3 sources. For all other 3 sources, we have separate sections 5, 6, 7, and 8, and each 4 sections has subsection 1, 2, and 3. So, section 5, subsection 1 explains about the employment income. It says an individual. Here we call individual because employment is applicable only for an individual. ඒකට තමයි මම කිව්වේ අර සමාගම වලට entity එකකට අදාළ නැහැ. මොකද employment එක කියන්නේ සේවයේ යෙදීමෙන් රස්සාවක් කිරීමෙන් ලැබෙන income එකනේ. එතකොට මෙයා මිනිසෙක් නිසා එයාට විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. සමාගම මිනිසෙක් නෙවෙයි රස්සාවක් කරන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට මෙතනදී කියනවා individuals income from an employment for a year of assessment shall be the individual's gains and profits from the employment for that year of assessment. So, මෙතනදී කියනවා මෙන්න මේක තමයි employment income කියන්නේ. Then we can move to subsection 2. It says, in calculating an individual's gain and profits from an employment for a year of assessment, the following amounts received or derived by the individual during the year of assessment from the employment shall be included. දැන් ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙනවද මේ වචනේ? දැන් මෙතන 2 වලින් කියන්නේ employment income එක විදිහට අපි consider කළ යුතු ಜಾති ඔක්කොම include කළ යුතු. ඒතර මෙතන ඉඳලා ඒ වල ඉඳලා පටන් ගත්තොත් දිගටම කියනවා මොනවද include කරන්න ඕනි කියලා. මේ විදිහට. Then we can move to subsection 3. It says, in calculating an individual's gain and profits from an employment for a year of assessment, the following shall be excluded. That means there are some amounts we cannot consider for income tax purposes. Therefore, what we have to do, we have to exclude, we have to remove that kind of income. So, the පළවෙනියම අපි කරන්නේ employer කෙනෙකුගෙන් ලැබෙන ඔක්කොම income ටික එකතු කරගන්නවා. 2 වලින් කිව්වේ ඒක. ඔක්කොම include කරනවා, ඇතුළත් කරනවා, එකතු කරගන්නවා. After that, ඒ ඇතුළත් කරගත්තු ඒ වලින් tax නොවන ඒවා that are not taxable should be excluded. Those amounts are provided under subsection 3. The subsection 3 වල කියලා තියෙන්නේ අන්න ඒ වගේ අයින් කරන්න ඕනේ ඒවා ටික. Do you understand? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
Shall I share the attendance sheet? Okay, you can share. Okay. Likewise, for a business income, we have that kind of 3 sections. For an investment income, we have that kind of 3 subsections. එතකොට මේ වගේ මේ එකින් එකට තියෙනවා subsection. Each subsection says the amounts that should be included and the amounts that should be excluded. So what is the purpose of having an amended act? එතකොට මම amendment act එකක් මේක කොහොමද මේකත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ කියලා ඔයගලන්ට පොඩ්ඩක් කියලා දෙන්නම්. ඒතර ඔයගලගේ අතේ මේ act එකක් හරි කොලයක් හරි තියෙනවා නම් තමයි මේක ලේසි. අපි ෆිසිකලි හිටියා නම් අපිට හරි ලේසි. නමුත් දැන් අපිට කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. එතකොට දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා මේ section 5 subsection 3 වල තමයි අපි ඉන්නේ කියලා. Now I can share with you one of the amendments. මේක පේනවද කියලා කියන්න මට කරුණා කරලා. මේක amendment act එක. Here Inland Revenue Amendment Act number 10 of 2021. Can you see this?
No, ma'am.
No. Now?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, visible. This is Amendment Act, not the Principal Act. So I explained about that. Section Act number 24 of 2017 means Principal Act. ඒක තමයි ලොකු act එක. So now we are going to amend that Principal Act using this Amendment Act. So see the difference between Principal Act and the Amendment Act. Here it says this act may be cited as the Inland Revenue Amendment Act number 10 of 2021. So what is the purpose of this act? Purpose of this Amendment Act is to amend here an act to amend the Inland Revenue Act. This is the purpose of that. This is the preamble of that act. So it says the purpose of this act, the purpose of this act is to amend the Inland Revenue Act. Now we are going to amend that. Here we have short title and the date of operation. So now we are going to amend some sections of the Principal Act. So when we are amending that Principal Act, some sections are effective from some days and some sections are effective from another day. Act එකක් ගත්තොත්, I think you can remember the effective date of the Principal Act is 1st of April 2018. මතකයිනේ 2018 April 1st තමයි effective date of the first Principal Act. Now we are going to amend some sections of that Principal Act. So when we are amending some sections, what we have to do? We have to mention the effective date of each amendment. ඇයි එහෙම කියන්නේ? එක එක section එක amend කරනකොට අපි සමහර section amend කරනවා අර back date කරලා. Back date means with effective from April 1st 2018. Some sections are effective from some specific date. Some sections are effective from the date in which the speaker certified the asset. So, the certified the Amendment Act. So there are 3 types of effective dates. Because of that, we have given 3 tables. Subsection 2 is for other than table A and B. It says other than table A and B set out in this amendment shall commence on the date on which the certificate of the speaker. ඒ කියන්නේ speaker මේක certify කරපු දවසේ ඉඳලා effective වෙනවාලු table 1 සහ table B වල තියෙන provisions හැර අනිත් එක. අපි provision table පස්සේ බලමු. The in subsection 3 says the provisions of sections referred to in table 1. Table A. The effective date of these amendments are from 21st of April 1st. එතකොට තවත් sections amendments වගේක් effective වෙන්නේ මේ දවසේ. The provisions in table B is effective from the dates provided in the table. එතකොට table එකේ දීපු දිනවලට අනුව තමයි මේව effective වෙන්නේ. අපි නිකන් පොඩ්ඩක් පල්ලෙහාට ගිහිල්ලා බලමු මේ table වල කොහොමද මේක තියෙන්නේ. This is very important because for your exams applicable year of assessment is 23-24. So 23-24 means you have to refer all amendments up to today. That means mainly for the year of assessment 23-24, there are a lot of amendments made from Act number 10 of 2021 and 2022 amendment. එතකොට මේවා බලන හැටි කියවන හැටි දැනගන්න ඕනේ. මම කියපු එක තේරුනේ නැත්නම් මම රිෆර් කරලා තියෙන සෙක්ෂන් තියෙනවා. ඒ සෙක්ෂන් එකේ ඇක්ට් එක කියවන විදිය පොඩ්ඩක් ඕගලන්ට බලන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර මෙච්චර ගොඩක් ඇමෙන් වෙලා තියෙනවා බලන්න පිටු කීයක් තියෙනවද කියලා. 21 ඇමෙන්මන්ට් එකකින් ඇක්ට් එකට වඩා ඇක්ට් එකට කිට්ටු මෙන්න තියෙනවා table 1, table A. In this table A, items provided under table A and B, A, B දෙකේ තියෙන ඒවා හැර ඉතුරු ටික ස්පීකර් සයින් කරපු දවසේ table 1 වල තියෙන ඒවා effective වෙනවා මුල ඉඳලම ඊට පස්සේ table B වල ඒවා effective නෑ table එකේ ඒවා effective වෙන්නේ කවුදද? එතන මේ April 1st 2021 ඉඳලා. එතකොට මෙතන කියනවා section number of this act. Section 6, this is the section of principal act. So this amendment was made for section 11 of the principal act. මේ පනතේ 6 වෙනි වගන්තියෙන් කරලා තියෙන amendment එක effective වෙන්නේ apply වෙන්නේ principal act එකේ section 11. මේ වගේ තමයි මේ table එකෙන් කියන්නේ. Then this is table B. In this table we have given a specific date here. So these amendments are effective from the dates provided under table 2. එතකොට මෙතන section 5 ඔන්න දැන් අපි 5 කතා කර ඉන්නේ. Under section 2 of this act, amendment was made to section 5 of the principal act. That amendment is applicable effective from the 1st of April 2018. එතකොට section 5 වලට amendment එකක් කරනවා. දැන් අපි බල ඉන්නේ section 5. ඒතර මට ඕනුනේ amendment එක කරපු හැටි ඔයගලන්ට පෙන්නන්න. එතකොට මේ වගේ amendments පනත පුරාම කරලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට මේ amendment එක effective වෙන්නේ කවදද? principal act එක පටන් ගත්ත දවසේ ඉඳලා. එතකොට මේ වගේ එකින් එකට ආපු amendments ඔයගලන්ගේ අද දවස වෙනකොට apply වෙනවා. Okay, now we can go to section 2 of this act. Okay. Now we are in section 2. හොඳට බලන්න section එක amend කරන්න ලියන විදිය. This is the section of this act, section 2. Under section 2 of this act, amendment was made to section 5 of the principal act. On the marginal note එකේ කියනවා ওই section එකකට amendment එක කරන්න. එතකොට ඔයගොල්ලෝ ළඟ principal act එක තියෙනවා නම් ඔයගලන්ට පුළුවන් section 5 වලට මේක කරපු හැටි. Let's read. Section 5 of the Principal Act, hereinafter referred to as the Principal Act, is hereby amended in subsection 3 of that section as follows. එතකොට මොන section එකකට amendment එක කරන්න යන්නේ? Section subsection 3 වලට. Subsection 3 is for what? Subsection 3 is for excluding some items of the employment income. මතකයිනේ subsection 1, 2, 3 තුනක් තිබුණා. 1 is for the explanation, 2 is for the inclusion, and 3 is for exclusion. So some items are excluded under subsection 3 of section 5. So for that subsection 3, we have made an amendment. Under subsection 3, we had several categories. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට මම දුන්න slides photocopies අරන් තියෙනවා නම් එතන උනත් මේක බලන්න පුළුවන්. Subsection 3 වල කොහොමද තියෙන්නේ. So, 1, it says, in paragraph C of that subsection means this subsection 3. That subsection, by the substitution for the words on equal terms. In the Principal Act, there was a term on equal terms, 3 words. So now what we are going to do, we are going to amend these 3 terms. How? Of the words in the same grade of the service on equal terms. එතකොට අපි කොහොමද මේක amend කරන්නේ? On equal terms, instead of these 3 terms, on equal terms, we remove that 3 words and we have to insert in the same grade of the service on equal terms. ඔන්නෝම කරලා තමයි amend කරන්න යන්නේ. So, after that, we have another amendment to that subsection 3. That is under F, under paragraph F of subsection 3. It has these wordings: Provident or Savings Fund or Savings Society. We are going to remove that and we are going to include another word, substitute the word Provident, Gratuity or Savings Fund or Savings Society. That is how we are going to amend it. This is one of the method we amend. This is another type of amendment. Here you can read it. This amendment was made to section 11 of the Principal Act. In that act, if you have an act, you can check it. What are they going to do? After subparagraph 3, they have included addition, included new subsection. Here within bracket means subsection. If it is a section, no brackets. If it is a subsection, bracket is there. So this is the 4th paragraph. එතකොට මේ section 11 කියන එකේ paragraph 3යි තියෙන්නේ නැත්තේ. Now what have happened? A new paragraph was added. Addition. Amended by the addition. Immediately after subsection 3 of that section. ඔන්න එතකොට අලුතෙන් subsection එකක් දැම්මා. ඒක තමයි එතනදී කරන්නේ. Let's see one more amendment. Here. This amendment was made to insert new section. Earlier we saw insertion of new subsection. Now we have included new section. The following new section is hereby inserted immediately after section 15. එතකොට 15ට පස්සේ පනතේ. In the original act, we have section 15 and section 16. If we want to insert new section in between those two sections, available two sections, that means section 15 and 16, what we have to do? We have to introduce new number. So we have section 15 and section 16. Therefore, we cannot number this as section 16. Section 16 is also already available. Because of that, we called it section 15A. Here you can see no bracket. No bracket means this is a section. We call it section 15A. එතකොට මේ ගැන දන්නේ නැති සමහර මොකද කරන්නේ? A වලට මෙවරහනක් දාන්න. 15 වරහන් ඇතුලේ. If we have inserted the bracket for that A, what does it mean? It means section 15 subsection or subparagraph. එතකොට මෙතන එහෙම ආවොත් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ එනවා. එතකොට අපි මොකද කරන්නේ? අපි මේක වරහන් දාලා නැහැ. If we want to increase a subsection, then how do we do it? 15A1A. We can insert A within this bracket. හරිද? ඔන්න ඔහොම තමයි amendment එකක් දාන්නේ. එතකොට මම මේ පෙන්නේ ඔයගලන්ට amendment act එක. මේ amendment act එකේ ඔයගලන්ට පේන්න ඇති amendment එක කරා section 2 වලට මේක පොඩ්ඩක් මතක තියාගන්න. C වලටයි F වලටයි amendment එකක් කරා කියලා කරපු විදිහ බලන්න. On equal terms, instead of the word on equal terms, we have substituted these wordings in the same grade of the service on equal terms කියලා දැම්මා. එතකොට මේක දාලා තමයි දැන් අපි මේක කතා කරන්නේ. එතකොට මේ වචන ටික අපි strike off කරනවා. ඒ වෙනුවට මේ වචන වලින් තමයි දැන් කතා. මේක effective වුණේ with effect from April 1st 2018 නිසා අපි 19 year of assessment එකට මේක විදිහට තමයි සලකන්නේ. හැබැයි effective date, if the effective date is from 21st April 1st now, අපි 18, 19, 19, 20, 2021 වෙනකම සලකන්නේ මෙන්න මේ වචන ටික. From 21-22 year of assessment, we consider these terms instead of these three terms. On equal terms කියන එක වෙනුවට මේ වචන ටික තමයි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ with effect from 21-22 year of assessment. පැහැදිලිද මං කියපු ටික? පැහැදිලිද? මම මේක අයින් කරන්න කලින් ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න. If you have question, you can ask, because I am going to remove this sharing and I am going to share the principal act. ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් ඉක්මනට අහන්න. නෝද? ඔන්න මම අයින් කරනවා. Okay, this is the principal act. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now you can see the sections. You can see section 5, subsection 3, paragraph C. For this paragraph C, we have made that amendment. For that, which one? For which words? On equal terms. For these three terms, on equal terms, what we have to do? We have to strike off these three terms and we have to substitute instead of these three terms on equal terms. අර දිගට කෑල්ලක් තිබුණේ අන්නේ කෑල්ල දාලා තමයි එතනින් එහාට අපි මේක amend කරන්නේ. එතකොට for item F, we had another amendment. So when we are considering this amendment, this paragraph, we have to consider with that amended wordings. හරිද? එතකොට මෙන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි මේ act එකක් බලන්න. act එකක් කියවන්න. හරි. act එක ගැන ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවද? මොකද අපි act එකෙන් අයින් වෙලා අපි යමු අපේ slides වලින් කතා කරන්න. එතකොට මොකද slides වලට තියෙන්නේ each and every word in the act I have included to my slides. So we can discuss using that slides. අපිට ඔයගලන්ට හිතෙනවා නම් act එකකින් යන්නේ ලේසි කියලා එහෙමත් පුළුවන්. slides වලින් යන්නේ ලේසි කියලා හිතනවා නම් එහෙමත් පුළුවන්. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපේ department එකේ අයට අපි act එකක් කරන්නේ මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඇහැට act එක හුරු වෙන්න ඕනේ හින්දා. හැමෝම ළඟ act එක තියෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ act එකකින් වැඩ කරන්නේ. ඉතින් ඕගොල්ලෝ මෙතන exam එකට විතරක්නේ. ඒක නිසා ඕගොල්ලෝ act එක බලනවා නම් හොඳයි. එහෙම act එක නැති අයට අපේ slides වලින් ඔයාලට read කරන්නත් පුළුවන්. හැබැයි මේකේ තියෙන ඔක්කොම wordings මම ඒකේ දාන්න තියෙනවා. Now we can Now I'm going to share taxation law and practice income tax. This is the document set number 2. So this is for employment income. We can you see this new slides? No?
Yes, we can see, ma'am. We can see it.
Good. We can discuss about the employment income. Under that employment income, we can consider, I will explain about the employee, employer, and the employment, then gains and profits from employment, and amounts that we have to exclude from the employment and exemptions. So, employment, business, and investment. I think you can remember I have explained about these three business income sources. So, I have mentioned that the employment is the dominant one. First of all, we have to categorize income. If it is under employment, we should categorize income under employment. Business the investment the kila balan isella. පළවෙනිම අපි ඉන්කම් එකක් ගත්ත ගමන් බලන්න මේක employment. ඒ employment ද කියලා වයිටින විදි මම ඔයගලන්ට කිව්වා එතනට දැම්මා. Then as I explained, it is very difficult to draw a line in between these employment and business and investment. Then if it is an investment, if it is an employment, there are some income that can be categorized under employment income. So if we have salaries, rents, interest, service fees, like that, we have a lot of income categories there. So we have to categorize these income under relevant income sources. So under section 5, it says, section 5 is for the calculation or for the consideration of gains and profits from employment. Normally we called it gains and profits from employment. Even though we do not deduct expenditure, the normal terms we use is gains and profits. අපි කතා කරන්නේ gains and profits කියලා. අපි profits කියලා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කියන්නේ වියදමක් අඩු කරාට පස්සේ එන ලාභය කියන එක. නමුත් අපි බදු වලදී ගන්න කතා කරන්නේ gains and profits from employment. So if we receive gains and profits from employment, we have to categorize it under employment income. Then we have definition for each such term. That means for the term the employee, We have a definition in section 195. It says, employee means an individual engaged in employment. So in our definitions, we have two kinds of important words. One is means, another one is includes. So if we have the term means, that means කියන එකෙන් කියන්නේ මේක තමයි අර්ථය. Includes means, if we have a term includes here, that means we can include more things other than the provided definition. Here, the term employer also has a definition under section 195. It says means the person who engages or remunerates an employee in employment or pays a pension or other remuneration to a former employee or to any other person for the past services of such former employee, and includes, here we use that includes word, includes in the case of an entity specified in column 1 hereafter, the person specified in the corresponding entry in column 2. So we have column 1 and column 2. In that column 1 and column 2, we can see who are the employee and who are the employers. Here, this is the organization. If it is a company, body of persons, or corporate one, incorporate one, then employer means director, secretary, manager, or other principal officer of such company or body of persons. If it is a partner, who is the employer? If it is a partner, employer is a president partner. Normally president partner. If it is a trust, trustee or trustees of the trust. If it is a non-resident person, the agent or attorney of such person in Sri Lanka. If it is a government institution, then the employer is accountant or director of finance or administrative officer or head of the department or institution or secretary to the minister, like that. So these are the employers. These are the organizations. Under column 1, we have given the organization, and under column 2, we have given the respective employers. Then we have a definition for the employment. So in the definition section, that means section 195, we have separate definitions for each term. That means for term employee, term employer, and for term employment. It says employment means a position of an individual. That means there should be a position. Position එකක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ තැනකට යනකොට. මෙයා කවුද? Directorද? Secretaryද? Accountantද? General Commissionerද? ඒ වගේ මොකක්ද position එක? Lecturerද? Position එකක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. A position of an individual as manager of an entity. Manager කෙනෙක් විදියට position එකක්. ඒකට මෙන්න මේ වගේ කරුණු ඉෂ්ට වෙන්න ඕනේ. A position of an individual entitling the individual to a fixed or ascertainable remuneration in respect of services performed. That means there should be a fixed remuneration. A public office held by an individual. A position of an individual to whom any payment is made or due by or from an employer or who receives any other benefits as an employee, then a position as a corporation or company director. එතකොට company එකක director කෙනෙක් වුණත් ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙනවා එහෙම position එකක් තිබුණත් එයාකත් employment එකක්. එතනත් එයාගේ employment එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා අපි සලකනවා. So, not only this, the employment includes past, present or prospective employment. What is the meaning of that? past, present or prospective. Past means it is in the meaning it is past. අපේ පරණ ඉස්සර අපේ සේවයේ හිටියා නම්. Present means now we are working. And prospective means future employment. If it is if we receive something in respect of future employment, that income also a part of the employment income. Then the manager. For the term manager, we have a definition. Manager in relation to an entity means a counselor, director, manager, member, officer, or other persons who participate or may participate, whether alone or jointly with other persons, in making senior management decisions on behalf of the entity. Hammer term we have a specific definition. If the act does not provide a specific definition, then only we can move to the general dictionary to find out a meaning for that specific term. So, in the definition of employment, it said the present, past, and prospective employment. So, you know the past employment. Past employment means we employed in past periods. So, the prospective employment means we are going to employ, that means in future. This is an example. Suppose there is a person, Mr. A. Mr. A works for a large accounting firm. He is now working in a large accounting firm. Company said there's a company called Company Z. It is a rival accounting firm. It is a separate company, not the company Mr. A works. It's a separate company. It is a rival accounting firm. That accounting firm wants to recruit Mr. A and they approach him. මෙහෙම වෙනවද? හොඳට කවුරුරි වැඩ කරනවා නම් තව කම්පැනි එකක් දැකලා අරයව අපිට ගත්තොත් හොඳයි කියලා පොඩ්ඩක් යාට අප්‍රෝච් කරන ඒවා තියෙනවා අපේ රටේ. දෙවි ලෝකෙ කොහෙද? Mr. A is reluctant, so company Z tries to convince him by giving him a new motorcycle for agreeing to commence employment with them in 3 months. එතකොට මොකද කරන්නේ? කුංචි පගාවක් දෙනවා. එයා එච්චර කැමති නෑ වගේ නම් යන්න මොකද කරන්නේ? පගාවක් දෙනවා අපි දැන් අපි ඔයාට මෙහෙම එකක් දෙන්නම් කියලා. මේ මොටරසයිකල් එකකට නම් යන කෙනෙක් නැති වෙයි. ඊට වඩා දෙයක් දුන්නොත් නම් කවුරු හරි යයි නේද? එතකොට ඔන්න මෙයාට කියනවා මෙහෙම එකක් දෙන්නම් ඔයා අපි ළඟට එන්න කියලා. The market turns and by the end of 3 months, company Z no longer wishes to employ Mr. A and so Mr. A stays with his current firm. After they wanted to recruit him within 3 months, after 3 months, but within that period, Mr. Z එයාගේ අදහස් වෙනස් කරගත්තා. ඒගොල්ලන්ට දැන් ඕනේ නැහැ Mr. A ගන්න. ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඊට වඩා හොඳ කෙනෙක් හම්බෙන්න. So, Mr. A has a prospective employment with company Z. This is a future employment, not the present employment or a past employment. So, at the time he is given a motorcycle. At that time, they have given a motorcycle. A prospective employment is an employment, even though that is a prospective employment, even though he is not an employment of that company, it is a prospective employment for the purpose of section 195. Therefore, the value of the motorcycle must be included in calculating Mr. A's income from employment with company. That means he should include it under his employment income. එතකොට එයාට එයාගේ company A එකේ employment income එක වගේම company Z එකේනුත් එයාට employment income එකක් තියෙනවා. I think you can remember one person can have more than one employment. එක්කෙනෙක්ට දැන් ඔයගලට employment කියන එකට definition එකේ දැක්ක directors ලත් employees ලා. එතකොට එකම පුද්ගලයෙක් ආයතන කීපයක director වෙන්න පුළුවන්. group of companies වල එහෙම ඇති. රජයේ ආයතන වල එහෙම තැන් තියෙනවා. එතකොට සමහරු secondment යනවා. එක තැනක වැඩ කරනවා, තව තැනකට යනවා, දෙතැනකින් සාමාන්‍ය පඩියක් ගන්නවා, allowance එකක් ගන්නවා. So those are employments. So if one person has more than one employment, that is also a part of the employment income. Then an example for the past employee. Let's read it together. Mr. Pereira worked for company A. It is a firm of engineers for 30 years until he left their employee last year to pursue his lifelong dream to write a novel. He wanted to write a novel, so he left from the company he served. Mr. Pereira continues to refer inquiries and acquaintances regarding engineering matters to company A. In appreciation for this and all his work over the years, company A gives Mr. Pereira a 3% commission on fees charged to his referrals. එයා වැඩ කරපු දේවල් වෙනුවෙන් 3% commission එකක් දෙන්න යනවා. Mr. Pereira has a past employment with company A because now he is not working in that company A. He left the company there, but it is his prospective past employment because he received income from his past employment. This is an employment for the purposes of section 195. Therefore, Mr. Pereira must include the commission in his income from the employment with company. එතකොට මෙයාගේ return එක මෙයා හදනකොට අර පරණ අතීතයේදී කරපු රැකියාව කරපු එක වෙනුවෙන් දැන් එයාට ලැබෙනවා නම් income එකක්, he should include that income under employment income. The employment income කියන එක ගන්නකොට අපි past, the present, the prospective ද කියලා බෙදලා categorize කරලා ලියන්නේ. But we have to consider that 3 types of income when we are calculating the assessable income from employment. So I think you can remember these characteristics when we are considering whether that is employment or not. So one more few things also I have included here. Entitlement to usual rights set out in the bylaws, that it means EPF, ETF, gratuity වගේ දේවලුත් තියෙනවා. එතකොට අර how to work කියන ඒ වලට අමතරව මේ ටික අපි ඔක්කොම කතා කරා. ඒකට අමතරව අර bylaws වලින් ආපු තවත් payments උත් ඒගොල්ලන්ට අදාළ වෙනවා. දැන් if that person is an independent service provider, EPF and ETF should not be deducted from that service fee. But if that is a salary, when they are paying salary, they have to deduct EPF, ETF for provisions for gratuity should be made. So if that payment includes these kind of bylaws, then it will be definitely a salary. That means the income received by a person should be categorized under employment income. So for the segregation of these income for the employment and independent service provider, we have already issued the circular. So we call it explanatory note SCC 2023-2. We have issued it on 18th of July 2023 because we had several issues with regard to the employment when we have introducing 5% withholding tax on service payments. Most of the persons, most of the individuals wanted to categorize their income. Most of the taxpayers, most of the individuals wanted to determine whether their income is from employment or from the independent service contract. Because of that, we had a big issue. Therefore, we have issued explanatory note. ඔයගලන්ට මතක ඇති ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් ආවා. අර withholding tax එකක් දැම්ම 5%. මේක දැම්මට පස්සේ ගොඩාක් දෙනාට ප්‍රශ්නයක් ආවා. අපිට කපන්න ඕනේ withholding tax ද නැත්නම් අපිට කැපෙන්න ඕනේ අපිට කියලා. එතකොට service provider කෙනෙකුගෙන් කපන්න මේ 105ක් employment එකක් තියෙනකොට employee ගෙන් කපන්න ඕනේ අපිට. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැනගෙන හිටු pay කියන එක. එතකොට මෙන්න මේකේ කෝකද අපේ කැපෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් ආවා. Because of that, we have issued an explanatory note. In that explanatory note, we considered these things. So the definition of employment in section 195 essentially refers to the general law concept of employment. So if the person is an employee, if they are, when making the payment to them, if they have to deduct EPF, ETF like that, as per the bylaws, then the income definitely should be for employment. ඒකට මෙන්න මේ වගේ හේතුන් අරගෙන අපිට බලන්න සිද්ධ වුණා මොනවාද ගෙවන්නේ කියලා. And one more thing, important thing is here, that is reassign, actually reassign from current position and reacceptance of same duties without having rights to bylaws. Such reaccepted position could be still an employment. Again, අපි රස්සාව කර ඉන්නවා. රස්සාව කර ඉඳලා ඉවර වෙලා අපි රස්සාවෙන් අයින් වෙනවා. ආයෙමත් අපි ඒ තනතුරටම ආයෙ රීඅපොයින්ට් කරනවා. ඒ රීඅපොයින්ට් කරනවා අර රාජකාරියමයි ඒව ටිකම කරගෙන යනවා. එතකොට ඒ වගේ දේවල් වුණොත් හැබැයි එතනදී bylaws වල හැටියට EPF ETF deduct කරන්නේ නැහැ කිව්වත් we have to consider that person receive an employment income කියලා. අපි එතනදී විදිහට තමයි හිතන්නේ. ඒතර මේක තියෙන්නේ මේ circular එකේ. මේ circular එක මට මතක හැටියට මම ඔයගොල්ලොත් එක්ක share කරලා ඇති. මේ circulars කියවන්න. This is an example. This is an example. This is an example. Miss Anusha has been engaged by ABC company to develop a new software program for their operators. As per the agreement, she is required to be present at the company's office daily during working hours. ABC has provided general guidelines for the project's completion, and she meets with the supervisor once a week for updates. Subcontracting the work is prohibited. Ms. Anusha will receive a fixed weekly payment and stands to earn a bonus upon successfully completing the software to ABC satisfaction within 3 months. The company also supplies her with necessary materials for the project. හරි. කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන් දැන් මෙතන තියෙන employment එකක්ද නැත්නම් service provider කෙනෙක් independent service provider කෙනෙක්ද කියලා. Who can tell me whether this is employment or independent service provider? කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන්? අනුෂා කියන්නේ employee කෙනෙක්ද නැත්නම් independent service provider කෙනෙක්ද කියලා. Independent.
She's an employee.
She's an employee. අනිත් අය මගේ උත්තරේ යට තියෙන හින්දාද කිව්වේ නැත්නම් තේරුම් අරන්ද කියන්නේ?
She's an
තේරුණා?
since
She's a
working hours, fixed working hours, and subcontracting is prohibited, as well as company supplying necessary materials for her.
Yes, supplies necessary materials, fixed remuneration is there, and it says even though the agreement is not lengthy, that means it is very engagement is for very few period, very shorter period, but all items are relevant for the employment. Therefore, she is providing an employment. Okay, I will give you an example. There is a doctor. That doctor serves to hospital. So in that hospital, that doctor receives a salary, OT, and everything. So we can consider that is as employment income. And there are some situations, some doctors are going to private hospitals for a consultation. What kind of income is it? Under which source? We have to categorize that income. That means that the consultancy fee from receiving from private hospital.
Professional fee?
Yes, it is a professional fee. If it is a professional fee, under which source we have to categorize that income?
Business income.
Under business income. If it is a professional fee, we have to categorize that income under business income, not the employment. If that person is independent service provider, that income should be categorized under business income. Okay, if that doctor has a dispensary at home, if he has a dispensary and he is also a doctor in that dispensary. So, what is the source of that income? That means there is a dispensary. That dispensary is owned by that doctor, and he also works in that dispensary. What is the income he receives? Is it income? Is it business income or an employment income?
Business income.
Yes, it is business income. මොකද එයාට එයාගේම ආයතනයේ employee කෙනෙක් වෙන්න බෑනේ. එයානේ employee එතකොට. එතකොට employee දෙන්නම එක්කෙනෙක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එයාට dispensary එකක් තිබුණා නම් ඒ dispensary එකේ එයත් වැඩ කරත් එයා ලබන්නේ business income එක. එතකොට ඔය වගේ අපි බලන්න ඕනේ අපිට ලැබෙන ආදායම වෙන්ද ලැබෙන්නේ. අර මිස් ඉස්සලා කිව්වා වගේ ඒවා අපි ඒවට දාලා බලන්න ඕනේ අර කියන criteria වලට condition වලට දාලා බලන්න ඕනේ මේක business ද එහෙමත් නැත්නම් මොනවාද employment. එතකොට employment එකක් වෙන්න නම් අපි එතනදී කියනවා position එකක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට අපි කොතන හරි තැනකට ගියොත් අපිට position එකක් දීලා තියෙනවා නම් එතකොට ඒ දුන්න position එකෙන්ම අපිට කියවෙනවා අපි එතන employee කෙනෙක්. එතකොට අපිට මේක practically වැඩ කරනකොට නිතරම එන ප්‍රශ්න අපිට theoretically අපි ලේසියෙන් කිව්වට practice එකේ සමහර ලාවට හරි අමාරු වෙනවා මේක employment business ද කියලා හොයන්න. Okay. Now we can stop from here. From next week, we can start from the amounts that we have to include when we are calculating the employment income. If you have questions up to now, you can ask.
When an employee retires, the vehicle he used for office purpose is given as a gift. What category it falls?
Yes, it is a benefit, employment benefit. Only the government pension was exempted. Government pension is exempted. If he is a government servant, if he was a government servant and if he received a pension, that pension is exempt from income tax, but other income are not exempt. Only the pension part is exempt. If he received other benefits when he is retiring, all other benefits are tax liable.
Thank you.
What else? අයි ප්‍රශ්න නැද්ද? ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවද නැද්ද? Okay. If no questions, we can stop now. ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න. ප්‍රශ්න තියාගෙන යන්න එපා. If you have questions, you can ask. If you don't have questions, we can stop now. Next week, we can start from the amounts that should be included. ඉතින් පනත තියෙනවා නම් චුට්ටක් කියව ගන්න. එතකොට ඔයගලන්ට ප්‍රශ්නත් එයි. එතකොට තමන්ගේ පඩියට අදාළව income tax එක හදන්නේම වෙනවා නම් හොඳට බලාගෙන ඉන්න මේක. Okay. Now we can stop the session. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, madam. Good night.
Thank you, madam. Good night.